Also an Equal Justice Works Disaster Recovery Legal Corps Fellow. Just a little background about me. I am one of the disaster assistance attorneys at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. We primarily deal with natural disasters. We have not, in my experience, nor in my supervisor's experience, had to deal with a crisis such as the one that El Paso is currently faced with. But we do have a skill set that we've developed in crisis management, whether that be natural disasters or any other crisis that may present itself, which is why I'm here talking to you today. What brings us here is the event that happened earlier this month in August. And we're going to be discussing legal needs that arise after these types of situations and how the legal community is in a position to be of assistance to this specific client population, and how we have a skill set that is largely beneficial to the community, especially at this time. So just briefly, like I mentioned, TRLA has disaster experience, primarily natural disasters. It's about 17 federally declared natural disasters, and a lot of those fall within the Rio Grande Valley and in the Coastal Bend community. And while this crisis is a little bit different from what we are normally used to, some of the things that we are able to do and provide for clients are the same. We provide legal advice and legal information to clients, our clients specifically, or legal information to those who may not qualify. We can get information out to them or get them to a pro bono attorney who can help. We do document preparation. We represent individuals in front of administrative agencies, particularly in natural disasters. That's usually FEMA and the Small Business Administration. In this disaster in particular, it will probably be more of the Social Security, unemployment context. And then we also represent clients in JP, state, and federal court. And so why we're here today is to talk to the legal community about your particular role in responding to disasters and to crisis like the one we're currently presented with, and to talk about the legal needs that arise and when they typically will start to present themselves. A lot of people wonder how the legal community can get involved, and it's important to know that as an attorney and working in law firms, you have a special skill set in handling crisis, and you handle them on a daily basis. And so whether that be an urgent deadline that presents itself in your normal practice, or handling a domestic violence situation with one of your clients, or in the criminal law context, one of your clients is rearrested, you are crisis managers, and to use those skills that you develop on a daily basis and working in your career field can be beneficial in working in a crisis such as the one we have. The community, local leaders likely will turn to attorneys as pillars of the community after a crisis. And so it is good for us to know how we can get involved. So as of right now, TRLA has got partnerships with the State Bar of Texas. We've worked with other LSC-funded legal aids, in particular in preparation for this presentation. I've reached out to a legal aid in Las Vegas who handled the Route 91 mass shooting, and so we've kind of worked together to make sure that this presentation is helpful and the legal issues that they experience may be similar to the ones that we're going to experience here in El Paso. And we are working with private attorneys, and in the natural disaster context, and something we may end up doing here is we work with law students from various law schools and getting cases placed with them to help with some of the overflow. We work with volunteer lawyer projects and, of course, local bar associations. Right after the disaster in El Paso, the state bar president did a call to attorneys, and he particularly named what we would have expected, the probate, the estates, the trust bars, that we would need a call for additional help to respond to this crisis. If that's not your particular area of practice, as it's not mine, there are other legal issues and other areas of law that are going to be implicated. And so if you don't practice in the probate area, you will still be needed in response to this crisis. This is always just a really good reminder. Our clients, both in our private practice as well in crises, have experienced a trauma. That's usually why they have come to seek the help of a lawyer. The trauma in this situation is obviously going to be more heightened, and it's more fresh. So it's just good as attorneys to keep in mind that your client may have some trouble focusing on the legal issue at hand when they are just trying to make sure that they are safe and secure and have their most basic needs. That sometimes, and it happens a lot in the natural disaster context, results in getting very close to a deadline, especially with administrative agencies. As attorneys, we're obviously very concerned about that. And so it's really a good idea to set the client expectations at the very beginning and just, try to take on the brunt of all the deadlines and information and, relay it to your client, but in a way that they can process it with the type of trauma that they're dealing with. And then fear of obtaining assistance. This kind of comes up in two different contexts, and one I didn't think of right away until I spoke to the legal aid in Nevada. The first is in the immigration context. We've all experienced that in one way or another working with our client population, is that some individuals will be hesitant to come out and apply for assistance. The other is, given the type of crisis that we have experienced in El Paso, that it happened in a public place. It was obviously unexpected, and it happened to individuals who were just, a part of the community. A lot of applying for assistance is going to involve individuals going to government buildings or to other large resiliency centers, which are large public places. Especially how this crisis came up, individuals may be hesitant to go into public where there is going to be a large population of people and apply for assistance. As attorneys, sometimes we can take that on for them by helping them apply online or helping them do paper applications, doing home visits and helping them apply and then getting those documents turned in. And if it'll depend on the client that you're working with whether or not that is a fear that they have. But it is something to keep in mind. They're not just not wanting to help themselves. It may actually be trauma-induced. And so our practice tip is to be accommodating and keep communication open and keep it often. Just because your client may not be calling you back doesn't necessarily mean they're not interested. They just may be dealing with something more safety, security, or medical related in the short term. And so it's just a good idea to keep communication open. So we're going to discuss legal needs arising after and kind of when those needs are expected to arise. And so in natural disasters, we think of them as happening in three various phases. And so we expect the same to happen in this crisis as well. Generally, we have a short-term, a mid-term, and a long-term recovery phase. The short term is generally about 2 to 6 weeks out. We are very much still in the short-term recovery phase of this crisis. Midterm is about 1 to 6 months, and long-term legal issues will start popping up about a year to 2, maybe even 3 years with complicated estate type planning cases. We talk about adjusting client expectations. Sometimes as attorneys, we have to adjust our own expectations when working with a vulnerable population. Everybody's probably seen this pyramid when they were in high school social science class, but it's a great representation of how to adjust our own expectations. So the green and purple are the basic needs of what our clients are dealing with right now. They're looking for safety, they're looking for security, they're handling medical issues, they are, looking for possibly a place to stay depending on their housing situation at this point. And so we need to adjust our expectations about where legal needs fit in with where our clients are at in their life. And so it also helps us understand when our clients are likely to seek legal assistance. Right now, they're looking at just dealing with what's presented in front of them. But as attorneys can think 2 to 3 steps ahead and realize financial assistance deadlines may be coming up 30 to 60 days after an event, and we know that they need to apply, but they're not concerned with that right now. They just need to get day to day. And so that's something that we can inform them of, and something that we can make sure that we keep them up to date on. Additionally, legal issues that are likely to arise first are going to be the ones that are associated with basic needs. For example, medical care will be one of them. So common short-term legal needs that we expect to see in this type of crisis are employment ones at first, both on the side of individuals who were working for Walmart at the time, whether or not they can go back to work, or whether or not they need some extended leave, and that applies to the victims of the crisis as well. Whether they need to take medical leave, whether their employer has wrongfully fired them for taking that type of leave. We will have a large number of probate and estate cases. I included education as a short-term need given the proximity of the timing of the tragedy that happened, and school is currently going back or school is starting, and so we will see enrollment problems. We typically see them anyway, but they may present with some different circumstances. Family law issues, whether an individual has the right to possess the child, or custody arrangements may need to change based on medical need, mental health need, and then divorce. That was one particular issue that when I spoke to the legal aid in Nevada, that they were a little surprised by. A lot of it has to do with the family dynamics that happened before the crisis, but the crisis may have exacerbated those issues and pushed them or accelerated them into a divorce now. And then guardianships and power of attorneys over wards, children who need to get into school, grandparents who need to take conservatorship of little ones going back. So financial assistance is also something that starts to come into play in the short term. We see this with various nonprofit and charitable organizations that start coming into the area. Red Cross, I believe, was here pretty quickly after the fact. I don't know that they've done any financial assistance yet. They may do that in the future. Other voluntary relief efforts are typically charities, nonprofit organizations, and religious organizations who come in, take donations, whether physical or monetary, and disperse those into the community. Insurance proceeds, those will likely be life insurance proceeds in this type of crisis, as well as various welfare and public benefits, for example, unemployment, state benefits, and Social Security Administration, for example, with survivors' rights benefits. So it's important as attorneys that we have at least an idea of what assistance may be out there for our clients, and the amounts, and if the eligibility requirements. Because we are in the short term right now, those are still being processed. Or you may see various, I think this morning I saw Texas Roadhouse was doing a donation. So you'll hear about these different things. They generally go into some sort of fund that will be dispersed later on. But it's good to know about deadlines, how to apply, what entails going into an application, and then talking to your clients about what the application looks like, whether or not they may be eligible, what happens if they get denied, is that something that they're willing to go through and do. And then we always tell our clients to protect their interests, and by that we mean keep receipts, especially for tax purposes, or if they have public benefits, we want to make sure that there are no implications as to what benefits they are already receiving. And so keeping proof is really helpful. One thing I always tell my clients to do, receipts, I throw them away all the time, but if you just take a picture of it on your phone, and then get rid of the paper version, then you have one that's not going to fade or get lost or torn, and it's a good way to keep it. So I talked to Beto in preparation for this, and he informed me of some community foundations and victims funds that are kind of developing in the area. One of those is the El Paso Community Foundation, and the other one is the Paso del Norte Health Foundation. From what I understand, they've been doing some gift card releases and assistance in rental cars and things like that, and that they are currently, I think there's actually someone here from the foundation. Yes, I'm sure they'll talk about it in more detail, but developing an application process and a way to distribute those funds is currently in the process. Some midterm legal needs, specifically with regards to housing. This was an issue that you don't necessarily think of in this type of crisis. It makes sense in a natural disaster context, right? We're going to have quick evictions happening. People's homes are damaged. It's kind of one of the first things you expect to see. In this disaster, we expect them to come up and arise more in the midterm legal or in the midterm recovery phase. In particular, renters facing evictions. And that stems from trauma, that stems from employment issues, and that could stem from, medical care, whether or not they've been able to go back to work and pay rent. And the others, again, heirship and will and probate, that one's going to continue from short-term to mid-term through long-term recovery. And then mortgage relief, preventing foreclosures. Maybe you have a client who has been unable to keep up with their mortgage payments, and they have a mortgage company that's very quick to act. There might be some negotiating you might be able to do there. And as an attorney, sometimes just saying you're an attorney and working with that company gets the client a lot further than them just trying to explain their situation on their own. So immediate landlord-tenant questions will arise. They'll primarily have to do with evictions, but they can also arise in the context of, is my landlord able to evict me, or can I break my lease based on this situation? It may be that the victim is deceased, and what do you do in that context if he was the only person living in the apartment? Or if he was the primary leaseholder, does the family have the right to stay? Do they need to get a new lease? And generally the contract will govern that, but we have here at TRLA a lot of attorneys who specialize in housing and landlord-tenant issues, and so if you have any questions regarding that, we can get those to our team members. Notice to vacate. Sometimes landlords don't necessarily follow the 60-day rules or the notice requirements. It happens quite often. Just being able to get your client a little bit more time to get themselves together and vacate the property will be helpful. Whether or not they're allowed to get their security deposit back after their eviction. And then again, if there's federal housing, federal subsidized housing, then there's more specifically tailored laws for that situation. Regarding financial assistance and the crime victims compensation, there's going to be a presentation on that later today, I understand. But, you know, CVC, unemployment benefits and public benefits, those are administrative law. And you want to represent your client as best as you can in front of those agencies. Sometimes our clients try to do them on their own because it's something that they can fill out and kind of move forward. But it is a good idea to have an attorney look over some of those documents. But there are applications, eligibility requirements, and appeals of denials if necessary for those situations. Another midterm legal issue that's going to arise are consumer issues. I am by no means a consumer law expert. I dabble in it. I find it interesting. But insurance is going to be a big one, health insurance and life insurance. When I talked to the legal aid in Nevada, I was shocked to find out about 2 specific instances that they were completely unprepared for and had to face were some insurance companies, whether it be health insurance or life insurance companies, did what they called a Good Samaritan denial, which is basically saying that the victim put themselves in that situation and denied them based on that assistance. And in Nevada, it was the music festival, and so we had a lot of individuals trying to help others reach safety. It's something to keep an eye out for. We don't know that it'll happen in this context, but it is something that's appalling and our clients could potentially face. Another one, and I've seen a little bit of this in El Paso, just based on news articles that I've been reading. A lot of hospitals and insurance companies are saying they're waiving the co-pays for the victims. And the way they explained it to me in Nevada was that's exactly what they did, but then when they were discharged and they received their medical bills, the co-pays were still there. So they had to get attorneys involved and work with the insurance agencies to actually get the co-pays removed. And in some cases they were successful, in others they were not. There were hidden exceptions to the rules, as attorneys always know there are in these instances. And then in particular for employer policies, the insurance company would want to waive the copay, but the employer did not want to pay the copay. And so that is a particular problem that we may need to keep an eye on as the legal community and watch for. And if we start to see a trend, acknowledge it and maybe, discuss what we can do about that. Debt collection is going to become a problem, and this is regarding just maybe they're having a hard time staying up to date on their bills, if they're having employment problems, if they're in and out of employment, or they've lost their jobs because of the trauma, paying credit card bills, paying light bills, those things. Inevitably the debt collection process will start for them, and that's usually in JP court in Texas, but those are things we can help, a small legal issue at the time that could potentially get out of hand, we can maybe kind of preclude in the beginning. Car repossessions, I've seen this in my own consumer dabbling at TRLA, is sometimes when an individual is deceased, the family members don't keep up on the car payments. The car will be repoed and then a potential deficiency amount set for it. That might be something we're looking at. And it just depends. It also comes up in the normal consumer law context of just staying on top of your payments and things like that, which normally for clients isn't a hard thing to do, but when you're dealing with the level of trauma that our clients are going to be experiencing, it becomes a little bit harder on the day-to-day. Unemployment, again, is going to continue to be a problem. In Nevada, they experienced a lot of clients who would move from job to job, whether it was based on comfort or they felt more secure in one place. A lot of it had to do with employers letting individuals go for work performance, and that may actually be a valid reason, but our clients haven't recognized that that's actually trauma-induced. And so working with our clients to understand what trauma is, whether at TRLA we have social workers and licensed professional counselors that we can utilize to help explain this, but your client may also, in addition to their legal needs, may also need some mental health counseling that may be accessible to them. Immigration issues will arise. Right now, I know there's a lot of talk about the U visa and whether or not individuals will be able or be eligible for that. Additionally, we talked about it may be an issue of trying to get individuals with certain immigration statuses to actually apply for assistance based on fear. Family law will continue to be a problem in the midterm. In natural disasters, in the midterm and the short term is where we usually see an uptick in domestic violence issues. Trauma like this is a stressor on families, and so domestic violence problems may start to become more apparent to you as an attorney representing a client. You may need to pull your client to the side and talk to them about if everything is okay at home. And then modification of custody and enforcement of visitation schedules may also be an issue. When I talked to the legal aid in Vegas, fraud was surprisingly an issue in two particular circumstances that they expressed to me. They had a handful of individuals apply for assistance who stated that they were at the Route 91 shooting, but were in fact not. And so that's something you may want to keep an eye out for. It may happen, it may not, but you would not want to be representing someone and then realize halfway through, like they did, that they are not actually a victim of this crisis. And then GoFundMes. I think everybody in here probably knows what a GoFundMe is. A lot of fraudulent GoFundMes start to pop up in circumstances like this. Their general rule was they referred them to GoFundMe on how to report the fraud, and they kind of stayed out of it. A lot of times it arose between family members. So an aunt may have started a GoFundMe for the family and someone was upset about it. They generally just stayed out of it, but it is something to be aware of and keep an eye out for, just to acknowledge that that might be something that's going on in the community. And then long-term legal needs, heirship and probate, foreclosures and bankruptcies are going to start stemming from the small consumer issues that have started to build up over time. Title clearing for those families who may not have had clear title before this crisis and may not have had clear title for generations and generations. Those will be long-term problems to work as attorneys to get those cleared. Debt collection, and then again performance-based employment issues. So as you can see, one small legal issue, if not handled right at the very beginning in the short term, will continue to build and build and build, and can potentially lead to some serious legal consequences for our clients. I put up some local resources that I know of that are available in the area. The City of El Paso's website is keeping resources updated for the crisis, as well as Betta talked about it a little bit earlier, the El Paso Resilience Center. It's not open yet. They also had one after the Route 91 incident, and it's still open. They think that it'll stay open for many years to come, so that will be a great resource for our clients to get access to assistance benefits. I think TRLA will probably try to staff that for a little bit and make sure that individuals know that they have legal needs as well as other needs. There are organizations looking into the U visas right now, as well as the Mexican consulate in El Paso is involved. And then, of course, TRLA is always a resource. You can reach out to us if you come across a particular legal problem, or if you need to refer a client. This is our local El Paso office. Beto did a really great job, so I'm going to blow through these really quickly. But this is the Crisis Hotline, in which victims and victims' families can apply for legal services. This hotline stays up all year round. It runs for natural disasters, but we also open it up for these situations as well. So it won't ever turn off if they need to keep calling. And the goal is to have someone get through the hotline or come in person to the El Paso office or at a community outreach event. Beto went through our eligibility about income, assets, and immigration status. And if anybody has any questions, this is my contact information, this is my direct extension, and my email address. Yes.
Would you make your PowerPoint available to us and post it on the class process?
Yeah, I think I can do that. I'll work with Beto to make sure that gets done.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
How do you go about finding someone who wasn't really at the place but claimed so?